All right, let's jump right into this explainer. Today we're going to completely reframe something that usually feels like, well, strict, dry grammar, and turn it into an empowering toolkit for actual time travel. Now, I know when we hear the word grammar, most of us instinctively shudder, right? We're thinking back to middle school quizzes and rigid textbook rules. But we're going to look at English verb tenses completely differently today. Because honestly, whether you're an aspiring novelist trying to perfect a gripping narrative or a language learner just looking to sound more natural, mastering your tenses, that is literally your ultimate superpower.
Here's our roadmap for today. We'll hit 1. The time travel problem. 2. The map of time. 3. Mastering the flashback. 4. Trimming continuous clutter. 5. The fluency trap. And finally, 6. Finding your narrative voice. Let's get to it.
Section 1. The time travel problem.
So let's start with a really high-stakes issue that affects pretty much everyone. Novelists, language learners, you name it. The absolutely crucial point here is that failing to use tenses correctly isn't just a simple grammar mistake. It's a navigational error. Think about it. When we tell a story, whether that's a massive 300-page thriller or literally just a quick anecdote to a friend about what you did last weekend, we are essentially asking our audience to step into a time machine with us. And if our tenses are inconsistent, boom, our audience gets thrown right out of the vehicle. They get totally disoriented, and suddenly they're spending all their mental energy trying to figure out when something happened rather than what actually happened.
Which brings us to Section 2, the map of time.
To fix our time travel, we obviously first need to look at our baseline map. Because before we can creatively break the rules, we kind of have to know exactly what those rules are, right? And separating tense from aspect brilliantly illustrates a distinction that, frankly, most people completely miss. Textbooks love to group these terms together for simplicity and just call everything a tense. But separating them shows us exactly how we build contextualized meaning in English. Think of tense as your broad destination. Are we in the past, the present, or the future? Aspect, on the other hand, is the texture of that time. Like, was the event just a brief flash? Was it ongoing? Did it finish right before something else started?
Now, what's really fascinating here is that these 12 combinations form the entire foundation of our storytelling toolkit. You've got your 3 tenses on the left, your 4 aspects across the top, and when you multiply them, boom, 12 unique ways to frame an action. It's like a giant puzzle, and it gives us exactly what we need to ground an audience. I mean, just think about it. I eat is a very different vibe from I am eating, even though they're both technically present tense. One states a general fact, while the other puts you right in the middle of an ongoing, immediate action.
Moving right along, Section 3, Mastering the Flashback.
Okay, let's step away from the theory for a second and look at a specific high-stakes maneuver, effectively executing a flashback without completely losing your reader. The past perfect tense is your best friend here. It acts as an anchor for events that happen even earlier than your simple past narrative. Let's say you're writing a novel in the past tense. Your main character is walking down the street. That's your simple past. But suddenly they remember something from 10 years ago. If you just keep using the simple past, your reader is going to think this memory is happening right now on that exact street. No way. You absolutely need the past perfect, those tricky had verbs, to push the reader further back in time.
But of course, there's a catch. If you write a 3-page flashback and use the past perfect for every single sentence, your page is going to be drowning in annoying hads. He had gone to the store and he had bought a hat and he had seen a dog. It is exhausting to read. So to avoid this, novelist Amanda Boyden suggests this literal game changer of a rule. You give us a few hads right at the start to sink us into the memory. Once we're safely anchored, you just drop back into the simple past to let the scene play out cleanly. Then, when the flashback's over, you give us a few more hads to pull us right back up to the surface of your main narrative. Seamless.
And hey, let's see how this builds into another amazing tool, the habitual past. What if your flashback isn't just a one-off event, but a routine? Say your character is remembering their childhood summer vacations. If you write, "We walked to the beach," it sounds like one specific isolated walk. But if you shift that and say, "We would walk to the beach," or "We used to walk to the beach," you immediately signal to the reader that this was a bygone, repeating habit. It perfectly prevents them from confusing a hazy memory with the novel's present timeline.
All right, Section 4, Trimming continuous clutter.
Now let's pivot to a super common trap that really bogs down prose, especially for newer writers. I call it continuous clutter. The continuous tense uses an ing word paired with a helping verb, like was waiting or was worrying. And look, it's totally fine to use it sometimes, but relying on it too much makes your writing feel incredibly sluggish. You can see exactly why right here.
Look at that first example. It feels kind of heavy and slow, right? Now look at the second one. By replacing those clunky helping verbs and ing words with just the simple past, the narrative becomes significantly cleaner, stronger, and way more direct. We honestly don't need to be constantly reminded that an action was ongoing. We get it.
Next up, Section 5, the Fluency Trap.
Let's actually step out of creative writing for a moment and view this from an ESL teaching perspective to understand why even highly fluent speakers stumble sometimes. As any classic textbook will remind you, knowing the strict grammatical forms is literally only half the battle. You could memorize those 12 combinations we looked at earlier perfectly, but the real hurdle? It's expressing contextualized meaning. Out in the real world, speakers are constantly doing this mental gymnastics routine, trying to match the exact right tense to the specific emotional or chronological context they want to convey.
And here's a classic example of where those wires get crossed. A lot of learners confuse the past simple with the present perfect. They might say something like, I have been to the gym yesterday. But the hard rule is that a finished time period, like yesterday or last year, absolutely demands the simple past tense. I went to the gym yesterday. The present perfect is reserved for unfinished time or experiences that still connect to right now, like I have been to the gym 3 times this week.
So why does this fluency trap happen? Well, honestly, it's mostly because English learners, quite understandably, prioritize just getting their point across over perfect grammatical accuracy. If the listener understands them, their brain says, awesome, mission accomplished. Plus, they frequently fall back on the syntax of their native language. For instance, in languages like Chinese, time is often indicated just by adding a time phrase like yesterday rather than fundamentally altering the verb itself. So a speaker might say, I go to the store yesterday, relying entirely on the word yesterday to do all the heavy lifting instead of actually changing the verb to went.
And finally, Section 6, finding your narrative voice. This is where it gets really fun. Let's look at how your choice of tense directly establishes your narrative voice and dictates exactly how close your audience gets to the action. Check out this quote from Ian Banks. Using the present tense like this forces an immediate, intense, almost voyeuristic closeness with the viewpoint character. You stand up, wipe the blade. Because it's happening right now in the present tense, the reader has literally no breathing room, zero distance. It is incredibly effective for thrillers where you want to grab the reader by the throat, but yeah, it can be a bit exhausting if you try to sustain it for a massive 800-page epic.
But what if we're in the past tense? It feels a bit safer, sure, but you still have a massive decision to make. When is your narrator actually telling the story? Let's say our main character is named Sarah. If 40-year-old Sarah is looking back on her teenage years, she might say, my mom was a dietitian. But actually think about this. If teenage Sarah is telling us the story as it happens, she might be speaking in the past tense about an event from yesterday, but she would still state current, ongoing facts in the present tense. She'd say, my mom is a dietitian.
Holden Caulfield's narration is basically the gold standard for this. He's a storyteller looking back, but from a very, very close vantage point, just a few months ago. The story is in the past tense, but the narrator's now is resting just barely ahead of the events he's describing. It makes the whole story feel incredibly raw and unresolved, almost like he hasn't even entirely processed it yet.
Now contrast that with this excerpt from the novel Prep. Here, the narrator is looking back on high school from a much more distant, reflective vantage point. I mean, she casually mentions her 10th reunion. That completely changes the entire vibe of the story. The reader instantly feels safe. We know the narrator survived all the high school drama and has had years to process it. The past tense here gives us this really comfortable cushion of reflection. So, what does this all mean for us? Ultimately, choosing a tense isn't just about passing some dry grammar test. It's about anchoring your audience in the exact moment you want them to experience. Every had, every was, every present tense verb, it's a deliberate stroke of the brush on the canvas of time. The next time you sit down to write, or even the next time you speak to share a memory, ask yourself, are you truly in control of your time machine? Are you deliberately guiding your listener right where they need to be? Or are you just leaving them adrift in the timeline? Master your tenses, and you absolutely master the art of storytelling itself.